"Your Honor, I object. My dad is innocent, and I'm here as his lawyer." That's what a 13-year-old girl shouted in court, and what happened next left the entire courtroom frozen in disbelief. When Maya Thompson, daughter of a janitor, stood up to defend her father against a powerful law firm's lies, no one believed her. But in moments, she exposed a conspiracy that reached places no one dared to question, not even the judge. This is the story of how a little girl changed everything with truth, courage, and one unbelievable act of justice. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow the story gets even bigger. The courtroom murmurs faded into silence the moment she stood up, a small girl with a backpack slung across her shoulder and a cardboard folder clutched tight in both hands. "Your Honor," she said, her voice somehow both shaky and strong, "I object to this entire proceeding." The judge, a woman with decades of authority behind her nameplate, blinked. The lawyers laughed first, then the gallery joined them. What was this? A school play? But Maya Thompson didn't flinch. She looked straight ahead at the woman in the robe, at the prosecutor with the smirk, and then at her father. He sat slouched in the defendant's chair in an orange jumpsuit, eyes sunken, hands trembling, the man who had walked her to school every day, the man who never missed a parent-teacher conference, even after working double shifts, the man they now called a criminal. "I'm my dad's lawyer," Maya said, "and I can prove he didn't do it." 3 days earlier, Marcus Thompson had left for work before dawn, like he had for 20 years. Janitor at Rosen, Bright and Howell, a name too big for most to question and too clean-looking for anyone to suspect. The marble floors gleamed, the elevators chimed soft jazz, and the offices smelled of money and ambition. Marcus moved quietly, his mop squeaking rhythmically along polished floors. His uniform was pressed, his shoes always clean. People barely looked at him unless something needed fixing, but he noticed everything. The coffee spills in the break room, the late-night light in partner Whitman's office, the way young lawyers rushed past without seeing him. He was invisible, and that made him dangerous. Maya waited for her dad every night in the library next door, part of a little-known deal he'd made with one of the older partners years ago. While he worked, she did homework under the massive chandeliers surrounded by law books taller than she was. But she didn't just read her textbooks. She read the law, contracts, criminal codes, evidence procedure. It started when she was 10, more curiosity than purpose. By 13, she knew what inadmissible evidence meant, how to challenge chain of custody, and how prosecutors often buried exculpatory facts beneath jargon. She learned quietly, because people like her weren't expected to speak loudly, not until she had no other choice. The arrest happened on a Thursday. Marcus had just clocked out when 3 officers cornered him in the lobby. Richard Alton, managing partner and heir to the firm's legacy, pointed at him like one would a stain. "He stole them," he said. "The merger files, confidential documents, gone." Marcus stood frozen. "I don't even know what that is," he stammered, but no one cared. His ID card had been logged in the secure server room at 1:17 a.m. The security footage, corrupted. The other janitors, all suddenly absent that night. The files, missing. Within an hour he was in cuffs, and when Maya arrived at the station, no one even told her what he was being charged with. They called it grand larceny, corporate espionage, felony counts with numbers that didn't sound like real years until someone said 25 to life. Maya didn't cry, she didn't scream. She took out the same notebook she'd been using for years and wrote everything down. Names, times, facial expressions. Her public defender uncle once told her, most people lose their case in the first 72 hours because they don't listen. So she did. She listened to everything. Including the fact that the court-appointed attorney didn't even remember her dad's name when they met. "You should take the plea," he muttered. "It'll be easier for everyone." Maya didn't say anything, but her father looked at her, and in that moment, he saw something in her eyes, an understanding deeper than words. At home, she spread out every legal textbook she'd ever read on the kitchen table. She matched case files to legal citations, downloaded court rules onto her phone, and started building her defense. Not just for him, for both of them. They had no money for a private attorney. They had no connections, but what they did have was something stronger, truth, and Maya knew exactly how to wield it. At the preliminary hearing, the courtroom was already stacked against them. Her father's name was printed on the docket in thick black letters. His mugshot, a photo taken under flickering fluorescent lights while he was still in shock, flashed across the prosecution's screen. Marcus Thompson, the prosecutor said with theatrical flair, used his access to steal confidential documents, intending to sell them to a rival firm. We have key card data, motive, and the victim's own testimony. That victim being Richard Alton, the man with a handshake made of glass and a family fortune that reeked of entitlement. Maya sat quietly in the gallery, watching as her father shrank inch by inch. His lawyer, a man who looked more bored than busy, read a few lines from his phone and shrugged when the judge asked if he had anything to add. "Nothing substantive, Your Honor." That was the moment Maya stood. "I object," she said. The room turned. The laughter began, but she wasn't joking. "I'm filing a challenge on the basis of ineffective counsel," she added. "And a request to speak under Michigan Civil Procedure Rule 2.117C, the judge blinked. "Who are you?" "Maya Thompson," she said. "I'm my dad's daughter and his legal representative." The laughter died when she opened her folder and began listing procedural violations, each one cited with case law, court rule, and dates. She pointed out the public defender's conflict of interest, the judge's undisclosed connection to the complainant, and the prosecution's failure to provide access to evidence logs. "Where did you learn this?" the judge asked. Maya didn't answer. She just held up her composition notebook, filled with handwritten notes from 3 years of reading and listening. "While my dad cleaned your offices," she said, "I was learning how the law works." The judge paused. For a moment, silence held the room hostage. "Proceed," she said finally, "but know that this court holds all advocates, regardless of age, to the same standards." Maya nodded, and that was the moment everything changed. The judge gave Maya 10 minutes to explain why she thought the charges against her father were false. 10 minutes, that was it. 10 minutes for a child to prove that the case built by trained attorneys, backed by powerful partners, and validated by a respected law firm was nothing but smoke and mirrors. Maya stood taller than she ever had in her life and flipped open her folder like it was a weapon. "Let's start with the timeline," she said. Her father's ID card was logged accessing the secure room at 1:17 a.m. That much was true, but what the prosecution conveniently didn't explain was that the security server room, the one with the missing merger documents, required dual authentication. 2 card swipes, Maya explained, one from the janitorial staff and one from a senior executive. She paused to let the words sink in. "Why does the evidence show only my father's keycard?" she asked. "Where's the second swipe?" The prosecutor stood, trying to object, but the judge held up her hand. "Let her finish," she said. Maya continued. "Either the logs are incomplete or someone is hiding the second keycard data, and if they're hiding that, what else are they hiding?" She moved to the next point, the corrupted footage. The security cameras were mysteriously offline only during the hours of the alleged theft, she said. Every camera covering the server room gone, but the lobby cameras, still working. Hallways, perfectly fine. Why is it that only the cameras that could have cleared my father's name were corrupted? Again, silence. Then Maya pulled out her final piece of evidence for the day, a photograph. It was grainy, black and white, time-stamped at 1:26 a.m., 9 minutes after Marcus Thompson supposedly broke into the file room. It showed a man exiting the building through the underground parking garage. The man wore a long coat, pulled low over his face, and in his hand was a slim briefcase. This, Maya said, was pulled from a city-owned traffic cam across the street. The prosecutor didn't find it because they didn't look, but I did. The courtroom was absolutely still. Then the judge leaned forward and said something no one expected. "Approach the bench, Miss Thompson." Maya did, her hands gripping her folder. The judge lowered her voice. "What do you want?" Maya looked her straight in the eyes. "A fair trial," she said, "not a railroading." The judge glanced at the prosecutor, then at the public defender, who was sweating through his collar. "I'll allow her to continue," the judge said, "but under supervision. This court is not a playground, but neither is it a place for injustice." Maya walked back to her seat, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Her father reached out across the table and whispered, "You shouldn't have to be doing this." "But I can," Maya whispered back, "and that's why I will." Over the next 2 days, Maya worked like someone with a team of 20. She reviewed every custodial shift log from the last 6 months. She contacted city IT officials for access to public surveillance footage. She called the only two janitors scheduled that night besides her father, one of whom was suddenly out of town, the other unreachable. She even tracked down a junior IT analyst who'd recently quit the firm, a man named Desmond who admitted, in a private message, that he'd noticed someone tampering with keycard records days before the alleged theft. "But I didn't say anything," he typed, "because I wanted to keep my job." At school, Maya's desk sat empty. Her teachers excused her absences after reading about her in the paper. Her story had already gone viral. Hashtags like #LetMaya and Justice for Marcus flooded social media. But Maya didn't care about going viral. She cared about going to court prepared. When the trial reconvened, Maya had 3 witnesses waiting outside the courtroom: her father's supervisor from the cleaning crew, the junior IT tech, and shockingly, Stephanie Barnes, an executive assistant from the law firm. Stephanie's eyes were rimmed red when Maya greeted her. "I knew it wasn't him," she said. "I just didn't know what to do." Maya had asked her to come forward not as a lawyer, but as a daughter, and Stephanie couldn't ignore that plea. As she took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. Stephanie described how Richard Alton had been in the office late that night. Despite telling police he'd gone home at 7 p.m., she mentioned how he demanded a shredding machine be delivered to his office at 1 a.m., which was highly irregular. She also admitted that Alton had asked her to forget seeing anything that night. "What did you see?" Maya asked. Stephanie swallowed. "I saw him give a sealed folder to the security chief. I didn't see what was in it, but I heard him say, 'Make sure this ends up in Thompson's locker.'" Gasps echoed across the gallery. Maya nodded, then she turned to the prosecutor. "Do you have any reason to doubt this witness's credibility?" The prosecutor remained seated, silent. Next came Desmond, the IT tech. He testified how, just days before the theft, Richard Alton had ordered a manual overwrite of all keycard activity on certain floors. "It was above my pay grade," Desmond admitted. "But when I saw the timestamps were off by minutes, I knew someone was manipulating the logs." "Who has the clearance to do that?" Maya asked. "Only senior partners and head security staff." "Like Mr. Alton?" "Yes." The prosecution didn't even cross-examine. And finally, Maya brought up Mr. Jenkins, her father's supervisor. He testified that Marcus Thompson had never missed a shift, never taken anything that wasn't his, and even returned a dropped $100 bill last year, insisting it be logged in the lost and found. "Do you think he's capable of stealing corporate secrets?" Maya asked. "No," Jenkins said firmly. "He's the most honest man I know." The judge rubbed her temples as Maya returned to her seat. The courtroom had changed. The mockery was gone, the laughter replaced with quiet awe. A child had taken the system's weapons and turned them back on itself. During recess, Maya sat beside her father on a bench in the courthouse hallway. He looked tired, hollowed out, but he smiled. "You scared that judge," he said. Maya chuckled softly. "Good, she should be." She leaned against him. "We're going to win this." Marcus nodded slowly. "I think we might." As they sat, a man approached them quietly. He was tall, wearing a worn suit and carried a leather briefcase. "Miss Thompson," he said, "I'm with the Michigan Innocence Project. I just wanted to say, what you're doing is historic." Maya looked up, surprised. "I'm just trying to save my dad." The man smiled. "That's where all great justice starts." Later that afternoon, the courtroom reconvened, and the judge asked if the prosecution had any rebuttal. Crawford, the prosecutor, stood slowly. His voice was flat. "We have no further evidence, Your Honor." "Then we move to closing arguments," the judge said. Crawford offered a short, limp summary of the original charges. He emphasized the keycard data, glossed over the witness testimonies, and avoided Maya's cross-examinations entirely. "Intent remains probable," he concluded. "That's all I'll say." Then it was Maya's turn. She stood and walked to the center of the courtroom. Her dress was slightly wrinkled, and her hands trembled just a little, but her voice, when it came, was sharp as a blade. "My father is not a criminal," she began. "He is a janitor, a worker, a man who believes in right and wrong, and the only thing he's guilty of is being too easy to blame, because he's invisible to most of you. because it's easier to accuse someone who can't fight back. But I'm here, I see him, and now you do too." She pointed at the evidence table. "Everything you've been told about this case depends on two things: that my father had the means and the opportunity. But we've shown that he didn't act alone, that the logs were manipulated, that the evidence was planted, and most importantly, that the real thief is sitting in an office wearing a suit, counting on people like you to look the other way." She paused, then turned toward the judge. "I'm 13, I shouldn't have to be doing this, but here we are, because when the people in power fail to seek the truth, it becomes the job of those who care enough to find it." She took a breath. "I ask for one thing, Your Honor, not pity, not applause, just justice." Then she sat down. The room didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just sat there, stunned, unsure whether they'd just witnessed a court proceeding or a revolution. The courthouse doors groaned open the next morning as sunlight spilled into the halls, a sharp contrast to the storm building inside. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras mounted on shoulders, microphones shoved toward every passerby. Headlines were already running: 13-year-old defends father in explosive courtroom drama, daughter becomes lawyer overnight, David versus Goliath, the Maya Thompson trial. But Maya didn't care about headlines. She only cared about her father. And today, she was preparing for war. Inside, the tension was thicker than the air. Judge Langston entered the courtroom slower than usual, his expression unreadable. The gallery filled with quiet spectators, law students, journalists, even lawyers from nearby firms who'd heard the buzz. Maya walked in beside her father, not behind him. She wasn't a child tagging along anymore, she was co-counsel, and she was ready to end this. Judge Langston tapped his gavel once. "This court will hear new evidence filed this morning by the defense." His tone was firm but not dismissive. Maya stood, nodded respectfully, and approached the evidence table. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit 3 documents for immediate review. The first is a keycard access audit I obtained from the building's security vendor, complete, untampered." She handed it to the clerk, then continued. "The second is a transcript from a whistleblower interview with a junior partner at Rosen, Bright and Howell, stating under oath that he overheard Richard Alton discussing how to frame my father." A ripple spread through the courtroom like a dropped stone in still water. "And the third," Maya said, holding up a sealed envelope, "is a sworn affidavit from the firm's own IT director, confirming that the footage corrupted during the night of the incident had been deliberately altered, remotely, using admin-level access." The clerk handed the judge the stack of papers. He read them silently, his brow tightening with each line. When he finally looked up, his eyes found the prosecutor. "Mr. Delgado, were you aware of any of this?" Delgado, a man whose confidence had been crumbling slowly over the last 2 hearings, stood shakily. I was not, Your Honor. This is the first I've seen of these documents." Maya spoke again. "Because you never asked. You built a case on a single piece of evidence, an access log, and ignored every inconsistency around it. My father was targeted because he was invisible to you." Delgado tried to respond, but the judge silenced him with a glance. "Miss Thompson," he said, "your handling of this matter has been unexpected. You've cited legal precedent, presented verifiable evidence, and cross-examined with precision. But you are still a child. I need to ask, are you prepared to proceed with closing arguments? This court has procedures to uphold." Maya nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, I've been preparing for 3 years." And she had. While most 13-year-olds memorized TikTok dances, Maya memorized the federal rules of evidence. While others binge-watched shows, she binge-read legal textbooks. And every night her dad came home smelling like cleaning supplies, she told herself that one day he'd never have to wear that uniform again. She took the floor with the grace of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. "The prosecution wants you to believe this case is simple," Maya began. "That access equals guilt. That a janitor with no legal training, no motive, and no history of wrongdoing somehow executed a corporate theft worthy of a heist movie. They want you to believe he fooled lawyers, breached security, and outsmarted professionals who went to Ivy League schools. But my father never asked for any of that. All he asked for was a paycheck and a shot at dignity." She pointed to the prosecutors. What they don't want to talk about is motive, or the second keycard swipe, or the fact that the firm had millions to lose if the merger fell apart, and my dad saw something he wasn't supposed to see. They don't want to talk about why the footage disappeared, or how multiple sources inside the company are now telling the same story, that someone in power decided to make an example out of someone powerless. The courtroom was frozen. "I'm 13, she said, "and I know that shouldn't matter, but it does, because it means I see things you don't. I see what happens to people who can't afford justice. I see how quickly you throw them away. And I know how easy it is to believe that someone like my father, someone who mops your floors, can't possibly matter enough to be innocent." She paused, her voice cracking only slightly. "But he does. He matters to me, and I think he matters to this court. At least I hope he does." She returned to her seat. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Delgado, you may respond." Delgado stood slowly, but the fight was gone. He shuffled through his papers like they might rearrange themselves into something useful. "The state has no further statements at this time, Your Honor." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying you're withdrawing your case?" Delgado hesitated. "I'm saying I believe new evidence warrants a full investigation before we proceed." "Motion to dismiss?" the judge asked flatly. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge tapped his gavel. "Charges against Marcus Thompson are hereby dismissed, pending review of evidence for formal misconduct and possible civil rights violations." He turned toward Maya. "Miss Thompson, you've done something extraordinary here, but I warn you, do not mistake extraordinary for easy. This is not a profession built for children." Maya stood. "That's why I'm changing it." Gasps, applause. Someone stood up in the back row, then another. The gallery rose one by one as Maya helped her father to his feet. Marcus could hardly walk. His knees buckled, not from weakness, but from the emotional weight he'd carried for so long. She held his hand tightly as they walked past the stunned prosecutor, the silent court officers, and the crowd that had once doubted her. Outside, the press exploded. Reporters swarmed. Microphones lunged. "Maya, how did you learn the law? Maya, what's next for you? Maya, do you want to be a lawyer when you grow up?" She turned to the cameras, exhausted but steady. "I don't want to grow up to be a lawyer," she said. "I already am one." Later, back at their apartment, Maya sat on the couch with her dad, surrounded by unopened mail, news crews outside their building, and neighbors banging on the door just to say they believed in her now. But inside, it was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in days, there were no alarms, no court dates, no panic. Marcus took her hand. "You shouldn't have had to save me." "You saved me first," Maya replied. "Every single day you went to work and never gave up." Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out the old, worn notebook. She opened it to the first page, dated 3 years ago, and read aloud. "One day, I'll use this to protect someone, maybe even someone I love." She looked up at him. "I didn't know I was writing that for you." Marcus pulled her into a hug, and for the first time since his arrest, he wept, not from fear or shame, but from gratitude. That night, Maya didn't dream about courtrooms or injustice. She dreamed about libraries, about classrooms, about a world where truth didn't have to be dragged into the light by a child. But until that world existed, she would keep fighting for her father, for others, for everyone too easily silenced. Because Maya Thompson, janitor's daughter, courtroom warrior, and accidental prodigy, had only just begun. The morning after the charges were dismissed, Marcus Thompson stood on the tiny balcony of their apartment holding a cup of lukewarm coffee. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the city still yawned beneath the early mist. He watched buses crawl along the street, joggers trace the sidewalk lines, the city waking up like it always had, but something was different now. He was free, and not just from jail. For the first time in his life, he felt untethered from the invisible cage he hadn't realized he'd been living in for 20 years. Inside, Maya sat cross-legged at the kitchen table, flipping through her notebook, her pencil tapping softly with each page, not out of habit, but precision. This wasn't over, not for her. She hadn't just won a case. She exposed a system, and somewhere in her chest, something was shifting. She wasn't just defending her father anymore. She was defending every forgotten name the system had stepped over. "Dad," she said suddenly, not looking up, "do you think they'll come after us now?" Marcus turned around slowly, his silhouette dark against the golden skyline. "I think some already are," he said, and handed her the morning paper. The front page headline read, "13-year-old outsmarts prosecutors, what this means for the legal system." But the smaller article on page 2 was the one that mattered. "Whitmore and Associates under investigation for evidence tampering." Maya narrowed her eyes as she scanned the words. The firm had quietly removed Richard Alton from their board. He was on extended leave, whatever that meant. No charges yet, but the whispers were growing louder. A partner had turned over emails. A junior associate had filed an ethics complaint. The walls were beginning to crack. Maya looked up from the article. "They're going to bury it if we don't keep pushing." Marcus sat down beside her. "You already gave them the truth. Isn't that enough?" Maya shook her head. "The truth only matters if someone makes people look at it." She closed her notebook and opened her laptop, something she hadn't touched since before the trial began. Her inbox was flooded. Civil rights groups, TV producers, a woman from Harvard Law School asking to speak with her, but she ignored them all for now. There was one email that caught her eye, subject, "Urgent, wrongful conviction help needed." She clicked it open. The message was short. A woman named Sandra Martinez had been convicted 8 years ago for a robbery in Dearborn. The only evidence against her had been a partial fingerprint, one the defense claimed was mishandled. No surveillance footage, no eyewitnesses. Her 3 children had been placed in foster care. The email included a scanned letter from Sandra herself. "They never believed me. Please, just read my case." Maya's fingers hovered over the keyboard. This wasn't just about her father anymore. This was the beginning of something bigger, a mission. She opened a new tab and began digging. Court records, arrest logs, appeal denials. And within an hour, she found her first red flag. The partial print that convicted Sandra had never been matched against other suspects. The original print technician who processed the evidence had been fired for misconduct just 6 months later. "Dad," she called out, "I need you to help me check something." Marcus came over and looked at the screen. She pointed at the technician's name. "Can you call the number on this employment record?" He didn't ask questions, he dialed. 2 rings, then a tired voice answered, "Hello." "Hi, my name's Marcus Thompson. I'm calling about a case you worked on, Sandra Martinez, 2017. There was a long pause. "Who is this, really?" Marcus took a deep breath. "We're not the police. My daughter helped get me out of jail last week after I was falsely accused. We think Sandra was, too." Another pause. Then the man said quietly, "Meet me at the diner on 11th and Grove. No names, 1 hour." An hour later, Maya sat across from the man at the farthest booth in a near-empty diner, her notepad open, a recorder beside her water glass. He looked tired, weathered, like someone who'd spent years with secrets pressing on his lungs. "I didn't want to testify back then," he said, "but they told me if I didn't sign off on the match, I'd lose my job, and I had 2 kids." Maya nodded slowly, so the print didn't really match. It could have been anyone. Honestly, the lab was a mess, but she fit the profile, single mother, no alibi, they wanted it done quick. "Would you sign an affidavit?" Maya asked. He hesitated, then looked into her eyes. "You believe she's innocent?" "I don't know yet," Maya said, "but I'm going to find out." He slid his coffee across the table. "Then yes, I'll sign whatever you need." Back at home, Marcus watched her work in silence. She was laser-focused, building Sandra's timeline from scratch, gathering public records, reviewing appeal filings, highlighting inconsistencies. She texted law students who had reached out after the trial, asking if they'd help review documents. 4 responded in minutes. She created a private shared folder and assigned tasks like a project manager. And just like that, the Maya Justice Project was born, not with funding, not with a logo, but with resolve. 2 days later, Maya and Marcus visited Sandra Martinez in prison. Sandra sat on the other side of the glass, stunned into silence as Maya introduced herself. "I helped get my dad out," Maya said. "I think I can help you too." Sandra's eyes welled with tears. "No one's even asked about my case in 5 years, not even my lawyer." Maya pulled out her folder. "Then we're going to ask everything." Over the next hour, Sandra shared her story, how the robbery happened across town from where she worked, how she begged her lawyer to call witnesses from her shift, but no one ever interviewed them, how she'd been told to take the plea deal for a lighter sentence. She refused, and she lost. "Do you still believe you can get me out?" she whispered. Maya met her gaze. "I don't believe it yet, I know it." That night Maya started a new wall above her desk. One photo, Sandra, 3 names, Roberto 15, Sophia 12, Miguel 7, beneath them, Case 2. Her father stood in the doorway, watching. "You sure about this?" he asked. "You're only 13. Maya smiled faintly. "You weren't too old to mop floors for 20 years. I'm not too young to fight for the truth." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then let's fight." By the end of the week, Maya's wall had grown. Below Sandra's photo were timelines, newspaper clippings, printed text messages, employee rosters, maps, and sketches of courtrooms. Her small apartment bedroom now looked less like a kid's space and more like a war room. Her notebook, Volume 2, was already half full. This wasn't a side project anymore. It was a mission. Across town, in a quiet office space borrowed from a non-profit, Maya met with 2 law students she'd recruited online, Tamika, a 3rd year from Wayne State, and Eli, a recent graduate waiting to take the bar. Both had followed Maya's courtroom victory online, and when she'd messaged them with a real case to work on, they didn't hesitate. "You're really 13?" Eli asked as they laid out files on the table. "Technically 13 and 4 months, Maya replied without looking up, "but I've logged more hours in criminal procedure than most people twice my age." He blinked. Tamika smiled. "So what do we have?" Tamika asked. Maya pointed at the key issues in Sandra Martinez's case. First, mishandled evidence. The partial fingerprint was rushed and never cross-referenced with the national database. Second, Sandra had an alibi, but her lawyer didn't follow up with her employer. Third, and this is the kicker, the robbery happened at 3:12 p.m. across town. Her shift log says she clocked in at 2:45, and the restaurant surveillance footage, which the defense never obtained, shows her behind the counter at 3:05. Eli whistled. "That's more than reasonable doubt. That's innocence." "She's still in prison," Maya said, her voice flat. 8 years and counting." Tamika scanned the paperwork. "You have the original discovery." Maya nodded. "I filed a FOIA request, got 112 pages back, no mention of video footage, no interviews with co-workers. It's like they didn't care." Eli shook his head. "They didn't." Marcus brought in sandwiches, placing them on the table quietly. "You're feeding law students now," Tamika teased. Marcus smiled. "If you're going to save lives in my daughter's name, the least I can do is make sure you don't starve." Back at home that night, Maya sat beside Marcus on the couch watching reruns of courtroom dramas, but neither of them were paying attention. She kept thinking about Sandra's kids, especially Roberto, the oldest. She hadn't met him yet, but something in the way Sandra said his name stuck with her. "I promised her I'd help bring her home," Maya said softly. "You will," Marcus replied, "but it's not all on you." "Yes, it is," Maya whispered, "because I'm the only one who is." She turned back to her laptop. On instinct, she searched the address of the restaurant where Sandra had worked and found it was still open. The owner's name was listed on a business site, Carlos Rivera. 10 minutes later, Maya had found his LinkedIn page, and another 10 after that, she was composing an email. Subject, urgent, Sandra Martinez case. "Dear Mr. Rivera, my name is Maya Thompson. You don't know me, but I believe one of your former employees, Sandra Martinez, was wrongly convicted. I'm working with a team to gather statements. I have reason to believe you may have surveillance footage or shift records that could help prove she wasn't at the scene of the crime. Please respond. Lives depend on it. Maya Thompson." She hit send and stared at the blinking cursor on the blank reply screen. The next morning, she had a message waiting in her inbox. I remember Sandra. I always knew something was wrong. I never got a subpoena or any call from her attorney. If you can meet me at the shop tomorrow morning, I'll pull whatever records I still have. Maya stood up so fast she nearly spilled her cereal. Dad, I'm going to Dearborn. Marcus leaned out of the kitchen. Do I get a say in that? She grinned. You're driving me. When they arrived at the restaurant the next day, Carlos Rivera was already waiting outside, holding a battered cardboard box. Everything I've got, he said. Old security footage, time cards, even employee phone numbers. I never threw it out. Something told me it wasn't over. Inside, Maya plugged the flash drive into her laptop. The footage was grainy, but there it was, Sandra Martinez, standing behind the register at 3:05 p.m., talking to a customer. Maya checked the timestamp, 5 minutes before the robbery across town. You were right, Carlos said. She couldn't have done it. I know, Maya replied. Now I just need to prove it again in court. Back at the apartment, Maya compiled the new evidence into a file folder labeled Exoneration Request, MARTINEZ. She drafted a formal letter to the Michigan Innocence Project and attached the flash drive and signed affidavit from Carlos. Then she added a statement from the technician who'd processed the faulty fingerprint, now fully notarized, and a letter from Sandra's co-worker confirming she was at work the day of the robbery. This is everything, Maya said to Marcus. If this doesn't open her case, nothing will. Marcus read over her shoulder. You write like a lawyer. I think I am one, Maya replied. You are, he said, and more. The next day, Maya and her team filed the motion to vacate Sandra Martinez's conviction, including an emergency petition for her release pending review. The filing exploded across social media. News outlets picked it up almost instantly, and by the end of the week, the Martinez family had gone from forgotten to national headlines. But Maya didn't slow down. In the weeks that followed, she gave interviews, spoke on podcasts, and even attended a youth criminal justice summit where she was the keynote speaker at 13. She stood before a room full of suits, professors, and policymakers and said, "The justice system isn't broken. It's working exactly how it was built, to punish the poor, ignore the innocent, and protect the powerful. If you want to fix that, don't study me, study every case like Sandra Martinez that you let slip through because it was easier." The room went quiet. Then people stood up and clapped. And at the back of the auditorium, Sandra's children waited, Roberto, Sofia, and Miguel. Maya had invited them personally. When she stepped off the stage, Roberto was the first to hug her. Do you really think she's coming home? Maya looked him dead in the eye. I don't think I know. A week later, the state announced that Sandra Martinez's conviction had been overturned. She walked out of prison in a borrowed coat, her children waiting with flowers. Maya didn't rush the cameras. She stayed back and let the family have their moment. But when Sandra saw her, she walked right over and hugged her like she was one of her own. Thank you, Sandra whispered. You saved my life. Maya whispered back, you never should have needed saving. That night, the wall in Maya's room grew again. One more photo, one more name. And this time, 3 handwritten letters from Sandra's kids. Thank you for giving us our mom back. Marcus watched her pin them up. That makes 2. Maya smiled. Only 1,000 more to go. The story of Sandra Martinez's release had barely cooled before Maya's inbox filled with a new wave of letters, this time not just from Michigan, but from across the country. Some typed, some handwritten, some from inmates, some from their children. All carried the same desperate hope, please help me. The stories varied, wrongful arrests, public defenders who never returned calls, families left shattered by mistakes and indifference, but the theme was the same. People who didn't matter to the system, finally seeing someone who made it care. And that someone was a 13-year-old girl with a cardboard folder and a fire in her chest. Maya sat at the kitchen table, spreading the letters across the surface like puzzle pieces. Her father made tea behind her, glancing over every few seconds, knowing without asking that the weight was getting heavier. "This one's from Georgia," she muttered. "This guy, been in for 19 years, he says the state lost the DNA evidence and never retested it. And this one," she held up a child's crayon drawing, "is from an 8-year-old girl. Her mom's in prison for a crime she swears she didn't commit." Marcus sat beside her. "You can't save everyone." Maya didn't look up. "I know. But you're going to try anyway." She finally looked over, eyes glassy. "I have to." That night she took a piece of string and pinned it to a map of the United States taped to her bedroom wall. For every new case she took on, she'd mark it. Detroit, Dearborn, Chicago, Atlanta, Philadelphia. Her reach was growing, and so was the resistance. While Maya's name became synonymous with hope for some, it also began to unsettle the legal establishment. Bar associations argued over whether her actions were admirable or dangerously precedent-setting. Judges debated court rules. One prosecutor on a live news panel called her a child playing in an adult arena. Maya heard every word. She clipped the article and pinned it to her wall under the headline, "13-year-old activist overstepping her bounds." Then, next to it, she added another, "Sandra Martinez walks free thanks to teen advocate." "I don't mind them doubting me," she told Marcus. "I mind them ignoring the people still inside." In response to the noise, Maya decided to go public in a new way. She launched a podcast, Fighting Words. Each episode broke down a real wrongful conviction case, told in her own voice, with documents, testimony, and interviews. She opened the first episode with a line that would go viral within hours. "I'm not a lawyer yet, but I already do the work they're supposed to." It blew up. In 2 days, she had 50,000 listeners. By the end of the month, she had 2.1 million. People didn't just hear her voice, they trusted it. It was around that time that a man named Darius Blackwell sent her a letter. He was serving a life sentence in Illinois for the murder of a liquor store owner, a crime he swore he didn't commit. His case had gone cold for nearly a decade. No appeals, no press, forgotten. Maya pulled the police report and scanned it quickly. No DNA. No fingerprints. One witness, a boy who later recanted and said he was threatened by police. Darius had no criminal history. No motive. He'd simply been the last person in the store before the crime. And his court-appointed attorney had advised him not to testify. He was convicted in 4 hours, Maya whispered. 4 hours. She closed the file and turned to Marcus. "We're going to Illinois." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Pack your things." They rode the Greyhound bus overnight. Maya slept against the window with a folder clutched in her lap, her father beside her, arms crossed protectively. The next morning, they arrived in Joliet, gray skis, rusted fences, and a courthouse that looked more like a bunker than a beacon of law. Maya had reached out in advance to Darius's sister, Nia. She met them outside the correctional center, holding a photo of Darius from before the trial. He looked young, full of life, hopeful. "They took everything from him," Nia said. "He's been inside for 12 years. You're the first person who's asked about him in 9. Inside, Darius met them behind thick glass. His eyes widened when he saw Maya. "You're the girl," he said slowly, "from the podcast." Maya nodded. "And you're the man they tried to forget." She interviewed him for 90 minutes. Every memory, every discrepancy, every time he begged his lawyer to find the real suspect. She filled pages of her notebook. By the end, she had enough for a full investigative plan. As they exited the prison, Nia asked, "Do you think you can help him?" Maya didn't hesitate. "I don't know how to stop helping people anymore." The case took weeks. Maya requested dashcam footage from squad cars at the scene. Most had been deleted, but one clip survived in an old backup folder, a short video showing Darius sitting on the curb, calm, cooperative, unarmed. It contradicted the arrest report. Then she tracked down the original eyewitness, now 19. He agreed to meet Maya and Tamika in a diner outside town. "I lied," he said. "I was scared. They told me if I didn't pick someone, I'd get charged too." He signed an affidavit. Maya filed a petition for post-conviction relief, attached the new evidence, and called every journalist who'd ever reached out to her. She told Darius's story on her podcast, exposing the inconsistencies, the misconduct, the silence. Within days, the Illinois Innocence Network joined the case. Within a month, the judge vacated the conviction. Darius Blackwell walked out into the sunlight on a Thursday morning. Maya and Nia were there to meet him. He stood blinking at the sky, then dropped to his knees and wept. "Thank you," he whispered. Maya knelt beside him. "Welcome back." Later that night, Darius joined Maya on her podcast. It was her most powerful episode yet. "I thought I'd die in there," Darius told listeners. "Then a kid saved me." Maya smiled through the mic. Not a kid, just someone who never gave up. That evening, back at home, Marcus hung a new photo on Maya's wall. Darius, smiling free. 3 names, 3 lives, 3 families. Maya stared at the wall and whispered, "We're just getting started." But behind the scenes, others were watching. Emails from prosecutors' offices became colder. Court clerks were unavailable. Some judges began denying access to case files without explanation. And one morning, Maya received a message with no name, no sender, no subject. Just 4 words. "Stay in your lane." She didn't tell Marcus. She just pinned the message to her wall. Then started reading the next letter. Winter crept into the city slowly, laying a thin frost over sidewalks and whispering through the cracks in Maya's bedroom window. Her wall was now nearly full. Photos, timelines, maps, handwritten letters, some joyful, some still unresolved. Each one was a story that the system forgot, but Maya refused to. The media dubbed her the Justice Kid. They called it a movement. The public loved her, but behind closed doors, the legal world was growing uneasy. Bar associations debated whether to formally oppose her involvement in unauthorized practice of law. An op-ed in the National Legal Review suggested that, while her heart is noble, her actions could undermine the legitimacy of licensed professionals. And in certain corners of the system, the whispers weren't whispers anymore, they were warnings. Maya read the articles. She clipped every one and taped them beside her victories. "Let them talk," she muttered. "I'll let my record answer." That morning, while sorting mail, she found a plain white envelope, no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a folded note and a single photograph. The note read, "You're making enemies. This isn't a game. Stop before someone gets hurt." The photo was of Maya walking home from the grocery store, taken from across the street. Recent, chilling. She stared at it in silence. Marcus found her at the table, pale, holding the envelope in shaking hands. "What is that?" he asked. She handed it to him. His face darkened immediately. "This has gone too far. We need to report this." "We will," she said quietly, "but not before I finish what I started." Marcus looked at her long and hard. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "Yes, I do," Maya said. "To every person still waiting, every letter on that wall. If they're trying to scare me, it's because they know I'm close to something that matters." And she was. Her latest case wasn't just another wrongful conviction. It was tied directly to Rosen, Bright and Howell, the same law firm that had tried to frame her father. A man named Anthony Tony Weller had been convicted of insider trading and fraud, but Maya's investigation uncovered something deeper. Tony wasn't just a fall guy, he had been a whistleblower. Before his arrest, he'd attempted to expose illegal financial practices within the firm. Maya discovered an internal memo in a leaked archive online. It was short but explosive. "Weller is a liability. Better he go down for this than let the media near the merger." The document was unsigned, but dated 1 week before Tony's arrest. She stared at the screen. They did it again. She filed a request for Tony's full case file. It was sealed. Then the roadblocks started. Suddenly, the website Maya had used to access legal filings crashed whenever she searched Tony's name. Her FOIA requests were returned marked denied. Court clerks told her files were lost in transition. Even Eli and Tamika, her law student allies, were getting blocked when they inquired. "This is different," Eli said. "They're protecting someone." "I know," Maya replied, "and that means we're close." One night after hours of digging, Maya found a loophole, a forgotten civil suit tied to Tony's old financial firm. Buried in the exhibits was a deposition from a junior accountant filed under an unrelated case. In it, he mentioned shredding documents under the direction of a Rosen partner. The name, Richard Alton. She slammed her fist down on the table. "He's still out there, still pulling strings." Marcus came into the room. "Who?" "Richard Alton," she said. "He framed you, he buried Sandra's case, and now he's hiding behind sealed files, but I found a thread." Marcus sat beside her. "So what do we do?" "We pull it." Maya contacted a journalist who had once offered to help her investigate Alton. Together, they cross-referenced court filings, financial disclosures, tax audits, and internal emails from whistleblowers. What emerged was staggering, a pattern of framing lower-level employees to shield senior partners during corporate investigations. Alton wasn't just complicit, he was orchestrating it. But Maya didn't stop there. She reached out to Tony Weller through a contact in prison. He responded with a handwritten letter. "You're the girl who saved the janitor. I watched your trial on the news. If you're reading this, then someone finally believes me. Yes, I was set up. I tried to stop them. They made sure I disappeared. I'll talk, but only face to face." Maya arranged a visit. Tony sat across from her in the visitor room, thin, unshaven, but alert. "They told me if I spoke out, my family would suffer," he said. "My wife left. My kids won't talk to me. They made me into a villain, but I was only trying to tell the truth." "About what?" Maya asked. Tony leaned in. "About money laundering, about investor fraud, about Rosen partners using shell companies to hide assets during mergers. I tried to report it. Next thing I knew, I was in cuffs." "Did Alton order it?" Tony nodded. He didn't get his hands dirty, but he gave the nod. "Would you testify?" Tony didn't blink. "If it gets me a real chance to clear my name, yes." Maya walked out of the prison that day with a signed affidavit and a plan. She called a press conference outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed. "I have new evidence that implicates a senior partner at Rosen, Bright and Howell in a pattern of corruption, case manipulation, and intentional framing of innocent people," she announced. "And I'm filing a petition to reopen Anthony Weller's case with the support of an independent oversight committee." A reporter shouted, "Aren't you afraid of retaliation?" Maya didn't flinch. "I'm more afraid of silence." The petition landed like a bomb. The district attorney's office issued a statement within 24 hours. "We take these allegations seriously and will review all new materials." Rosen, Bright and Howell released a denial, calling Maya a self-promoting minor with no legal standing. That night, someone smashed the window of their apartment. Police came, they asked questions, they filed a report. But Maya knew what it was. A message. Marcus sat with her in the dark, a blanket wrapped around them both. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I am too," he said, "but that's how we know we're doing something right." 2 weeks later, the review board agreed to hear Tony Weller's case. Maya sat beside him in court. The judge addressed her directly. "You're not an attorney," she said, "but you've acted with more integrity, precision, and purpose than many in this courtroom. You may continue." Tony took the stand. His voice cracked, but his truth was clear. He detailed the cover-up, the fake audit trail, the meetings where they rehearsed false narratives. When he was done, Maya submitted her final document, the leaked memo, the accountant's deposition, and a transcript of Alton's own interview, recorded during the investigation into Marcus's case, where he'd said, "Sometimes you take a fall to protect the firm." The judge reviewed it all. 3 days later, Anthony Weller's conviction was overturned. Maya stood on the courthouse steps as Tony hugged his sister and cried into her coat. Reporters asked her for a statement. She looked directly at the cameras and said, "I'm 13, and I've helped free 3 innocent people. How many are still in there, waiting for someone to believe them?" The crowd fell silent. Then someone clapped. Then more. And before long, they were chanting her name. That night, back at home, Maya pinned Tony's photo to the center of her wall. Beside it, a headline: "Corruption at Rosen. Senior partner Richard Alton under federal investigation." Maya stood back, arms folded, and whispered, "You should have stopped when you had the chance." But deep down, she knew he wouldn't stop. So neither would she. The investigation into Richard Alton spread like wildfire. Within weeks, his name was linked to 3 internal complaints, 2 federal subpoenas, and a class action lawsuit filed by former employees of Rosen, Bright, and Howell. The board of directors distanced themselves. The firm released a vague statement promising cooperation and transparency. But Maya knew better. The empire was beginning to crumble, but empires didn't go down quietly. She sat at the kitchen table with Marcus, scanning through legal documents, emails, and whistleblower statements like a war general reviewing battlefield intelligence. A corkboard had taken over half the living room now, complete with red threads connecting names, court cases, and financial transactions. "You're not just clearing names anymore," Marcus said quietly. "You're unearthing an entire machine." "I know," Maya replied, "and it doesn't sleep." That night, Maya received an encrypted message from a contact using the name Ren, no details, just a subject line: "I have what you're missing." The message body read, "Meet me tomorrow, 4:15 p.m. Elevator 2, Underground Parking, Civic Center. Don't come alone." Maya stared at the screen, heart pounding. Marcus read it over her shoulder. "This is a trap." "Maybe," she said, "but if they're scared enough to bait me, they're scared of something I'm about to find." The next day, they arrived early. Maya wore her backpack with 2 hidden recorders. Marcus carried a burner phone and watched the entrance. At 4:15 sharp, the elevator doors opened. Inside stood a man in his 30s wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. "You Maya?" he asked. She didn't flinch. "Who's asking?" He reached into his coat, and Marcus tensed, but the man pulled out a flash drive and handed it over. "I used to work for them," he said, "until I saw what they were doing, then they shut me out." "What's on this?" Maya asked. "Emails, transcripts, memos they buried, stuff that proves Alton didn't just cover up crimes, he engineered them." "Why me?" The man gave a small, sad smile. "Because you're the only one who fights back and doesn't flinch." Then he turned and walked out of the elevator without another word. Back home, Maya and her team pored over the flash drive's contents. It was explosive. Internal communications showing Alton manipulating evidence logs in at least 4 different cases, including a murder trial. Another memo revealed how witnesses were coached to leave out specific details that would have cast doubt on prosecutions. A spreadsheet tracked acceptable loss, names of employees deemed replaceable in the event of legal exposure. "These aren't just isolated incidents," Tamika said, scanning through the files. "This was policy." Maya nodded grimly, "And now it's public." She scheduled another press conference for the next morning. But this time, the backlash was immediate and calculated. The same evening, Maya's podcast website was hacked, all her episodes deleted, her server access revoked, her backup drives corrupted. A message replaced her homepage. "You're done." Eli managed to restore the site within 24 hours using an offline clone. but the damage was clear. "They're scared," he said. "That means you hit a nerve." "They're also getting desperate," Maya added. "That makes them dangerous." Meanwhile, Maya began getting followed, not just in her imagination, real footsteps on her walk home. A car parked near her building 3 nights in a row. Once, her father caught a man trying to photograph their apartment window. The police opened a report. They promised extra patrols. But Maya didn't feel safe. So she leaned deeper into the work. The next person on her list was Jody Clark, a single mother serving a 25-year sentence for arson. The fire had killed her landlord, but Jody insisted she had been at work, an overnight shift at a hospital, and the fire marshal had reported electrical issues in the unit just a week before. But that part of the report mysteriously vanished from the official file. Maya looked up the original fire inspector, retired. She tracked him down through a property database, drove 3 hours to his small house in the countryside, and asked him one question: "Did you ever change your report?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but someone sure did." He opened a file drawer and pulled out a yellowed carbon copy of his original report. Maya's eyes scanned the second page, and there it was, underlined: "Primary suspected cause, electrical failure due to outdated wiring and breaker instability." This line had never appeared in the court file. "Can I have a copy of this?" she asked. The man looked at her for a long time. "Are you the girl from the trial?" "Yes." "Then take it, and tell Jody I never stopped thinking about her." Back home, Maya drafted a new petition. She attached the inspector's sworn statement, the carbon copy, and a letter from the hospital confirming Jody was clocked in and attending to a patient at the time of the fire. The public defender from Jody's original trial declined to comment. He'd since retired and apparently never filed a motion to suppress faulty evidence or subpoena the inspector. Maya dropped the petition at the courthouse herself. 3 weeks later, the judge ruled that the original conviction appeared fundamentally flawed and ordered a full evidentiary hearing. Jody Clark was going to get her voice back. Maya sat beside her in court as the inspector gave his testimony. The prosecution offered no challenge. They barely asked questions. After 2 days, the judge declared the original conviction invalid and ordered Jody's immediate release. When Maya walked her out of the building, the media swarmed, but Jody just looked at her and whispered, "You saved my life." Maya smiled through tears. "You deserved someone who believed you." Another name, another family healed, another thread pulled from the fabric of injustice. Back at home, Maya pinned Jody's picture to the wall. 5 cases, 5 wins. But the pressure kept growing. That same week, Maya's school issued a formal notice: too many absences, academic probation. They wanted her back in class, back to being a kid. The principal asked her to come in for a meeting. Maya sat across from him in the office, her backpack still full of case files. "You've missed 37 days this year," the principal said. "You're intelligent, Maya, gifted, but we can't keep making exceptions." "Why not?" she asked. "You make them for football players." The man blinked. "I'm not ditching school to go to the mall," she added. "I'm freeing innocent people." "I understand that, but we have rules." "So does the justice system," Maya replied. "And those rules failed my dad. They failed Sandra, Jody, Darius, Tony." The principal leaned forward. "This isn't sustainable. What you're doing, it's incredible, but it's also dangerous for you, and it's not your job." Maya stood up slowly. "It wasn't supposed to be," she said, "but no one else was doing it." She walked out. By the time she got home, 2 college law programs had emailed to offer her honorary access to legal research tools. And an anonymous donor had contributed $10,000 to her newly launched nonprofit, the Thompson Project for Justice. Marcus read the email aloud, stunned. "Looks like you've got a real team now." Maya smiled faintly. "Good, because this is just the beginning." Spring arrived like a cautious guest, soft breezes, blooming sidewalks, and a strange sense of calm that Maya didn't trust. The past year had been anything but calm. Her bedroom looked more like a detective's office now, her calendar booked with hearings, interviews, and prison visits. The photo wall had expanded onto a second board. 5 faces smiled back at her, people she had helped free, people who, if not for her, might still be shadows in forgotten cells. But for every life she restored, a new case arrived, and with each case, more resistance followed. The legal system was tightening its grip. Judges began requesting proof of legal mentorship before allowing her to participate in hearings, even when the accused supported her advocacy. Courtrooms grew colder. Attorneys grew sharper in their dismissal. A few even accused her of emotional manipulation in front of the media. One of them, a veteran prosecutor named Graham Cole, said on live television, "The courtroom is not a playground for precocious teenagers. Maya Thompson may mean well, but she is not a lawyer, and she's starting to do real damage." Maya clipped the article and taped it to her mirror. Below it, she wrote in permanent marker, "If I'm doing damage, then something needed breaking." But she wasn't immune to the toll. She barely slept, ate on the go, spent more time reading depositions than doing math homework. Her grades dipped, her teachers became less supportive, and her world, once filled with library books and schoolyard laughter, now rotated on court calendars and forensic audits. Marcus saw the change. "You're carrying too much," he said one night. "Even God didn't try to fix everything in one day." Maya didn't look up. "If I stop, someone else suffers." "You won't stop, I know that, but maybe you can start bringing others in. This shouldn't be a one-girl mission." She considered that. Tamika and Eli had been helping, but their time was limited. Maya needed more, not just volunteers, trained, passionate people, people who believed in truth more than title. So she sent out a call, "Join the Justice Project." Within a week, over 100 applications poured in from students, retired lawyers, even a few exonerated inmates. One of them, a former paralegal named Devin Holt, stood out. He served 6 years for a crime he didn't commit. Since his release, he'd made it his mission to help others stuck in the same cycle. "I know what it feels like," he wrote, "and I want to help the girl who gave people like me hope again." Maya called him immediately. By the end of the week, Devin was part of the team. With the growing staff, Maya moved operations to a donated office space, a repurposed library 2 blocks from the courthouse. It had cracked windows and squeaky floors, but it had space, light, and something more valuable, freedom. They called it the Thompson Center. Marcus painted the sign himself. It didn't take long for their first case in the new space to arrive. Case 6, Isaiah Reed. A 17-year-old boy from Flint, arrested during a traffic stop gone wrong. According to police, he reached for a gun. According to Isaiah, he reached for his inhaler. No weapon was found, no fingerprint evidence. Just the testimony of 2 officers and a suspicious dashcam video where the audio cut out at a critical moment. Maya sat with his mother, Denise Reed, in the Thompson Center on a rainy Thursday afternoon. "He's not perfect," Denise said, tears welling up, "but he's not a criminal. They saw a black kid in a hoodie and made up the rest." Maya reached across the table. "We'll find out what really happened." She filed for the bodycam footage, subpoenaed the police radio transmissions, and requested access to the car search logs. Eli tracked down the hospital records, confirming Isaiah had been treated for an asthma attack that same day. Tamika noticed the timestamp discrepancy in the footage, an 11-minute gap between the dashcam going black and Isaiah being placed in cuffs. Maya called it the hole, and she was going to fill it. She filed an emergency motion for evidence preservation and another for a hearing to challenge the chain of custody on the arrest report. Her team found a witness, a tow truck driver, who had been nearby and heard yelling but never saw a weapon. He agreed to testify. The hearing was tense. The prosecutor painted Isaiah as erratic, dangerous, a known associate of gang members. Maya stood, calm and steady. The only thing he was associated with was a medical emergency. She entered the hospital report into evidence, then called the tow truck driver. He testified clearly, confirming there was no visible weapon and that officers kept Isaiah on the ground longer than necessary. But the turning point came when Maya revealed her final piece of evidence, a forensics report from a third-party tech firm showing that the dashcam footage had been manually edited after the incident. The courtroom gasped. The judge demanded an explanation. The prosecution had none. 1 week later, the charges against Isaiah were dropped. His mother collapsed into Maya's arms outside the courthouse. "I don't know how to thank you," she sobbed. "You just did," Maya whispered. But even in that victory, Maya knew something darker was building. That night, back at the Thompson Center, she found a manila envelope slid under the front door. Inside was a typed letter. "You've made too many enemies. Step down or next time it won't be a letter." And beneath it, a printed screenshot from a security camera showing the front of her new office. They were watching. She stared at it, heart pounding. Marcus called the police, again. But Maya didn't flinch. She gathered her team. "This is what they do when you get close to the truth," she said. "They try to scare you back into silence, but we don't flinch." Devin stood beside her. "You're not alone anymore." Tamika nodded. "They'll have to come through all of us." Maya looked at her growing team, once a solo act, now a collective force, and realized that Marcus had been right. She had started this alone, but she didn't have to carry it that way anymore. That night, she returned to her bedroom and took a single sticky note off her wall. It read, "One girl, one notebook, one fight." She replaced it with a new one. "One team, one mission, justice." Then she sat down, opened the next letter in her inbox, and whispered to herself, "Let's go save another life." The letter was addressed in shaky handwriting. To Miss Maya Thompson from cell 247, please, I don't know who else to write to. Her name was Janet Holloway, a 58-year-old grandmother serving a 22-year sentence for drug trafficking. The state claimed she'd been moving kilos for a local gang out of her small convenience store, but there were no drugs recovered from the scene, no surveillance footage, just the testimony of a confidential informant whose identity had been sealed. Maya read Janet's letter 3 times. Every line trembled with desperation, but something deeper stood out. She had no prior convictions, not even a speeding ticket. Janet's grandkids were in foster care. Her son had died of an overdose during her 2nd year behind bars, and still, through her sorrow, she wrote, "I swear to you, Miss Maya, I never touched any drugs. They came after me because I wouldn't pay protection money. I said no, and then they said I was a dealer." Maya closed the letter slowly. This wasn't just another case. This was systemic rot, law enforcement turning their power against someone because they could, because it was easy, because no one had ever questioned it. Until now. At the Thompson Center, Maya laid out the basics of Janet's case. Devin listened intently, arms crossed. "No physical evidence, no drugs, just an informant," he said. "That's enough for a conviction these days." Tamika shook her head. "Only if the court lets the informant remain anonymous. They probably argued she'd retaliate if his identity was revealed." "But how do you cross-examine a ghost?" Eli added. "You don't," Maya said, "and that's the problem." Maya filed a petition to unseal the confidential informant's record, arguing that the conviction hinged entirely on a single unverified testimony and that the defense had been unable to challenge credibility. She cited Crawford v. Washington, a Supreme Court decision reaffirming the Sixth Amendment's confrontation clause. The court set a hearing 2 weeks out. In the meantime, Maya and her team dug into the original arresting officer, Detective Langley, whose name had come up in 2 previous wrongful conviction cases. Both were quietly dismissed after new evidence surfaced. Langley had retired a year earlier. Maya tracked down his old partner, who now worked private security. They met at a rundown diner outside of town. "I don't want to talk about Langley," the man said immediately. Maya didn't flinch, "Then talk about the truth." He stared at her for a long moment, then finally sighed. He had a quota, unofficial but real. He'd get tips from street kids, buy them dinner, offer to make charges disappear if they gave him a name. Any name, sometimes they didn't even know the person. "And Janet?" Maya asked. She told him no, he said quietly, wouldn't pay for protection, so he took it personal. Next week she was arrested. "Do you have anything in writing?" "No, but I can swear to it under oath." She slid a notary affidavit across the table. He stared at it, then signed. Back at the office, Maya added the statement to her growing case file. But then came the email. A legal order, gag rule requested by the state in Holloway v. Michigan. They were trying to silence her, to prevent media coverage, to keep the hearing buried in silence. Maya went straight to the judge's chambers and filed an objection. "Your Honor," she wrote, "this case is about transparency. A woman was imprisoned based solely on the word of an unnamed informant. The public deserves to know how this system is being used and misused." The judge ruled in her favor. The hearing would proceed, open to press, open to the public. Maya sent the word out. By the morning of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, law students, former exonerees, and Janet's two granddaughters, aged 11 and 13, sat in the front row holding hands. Maya presented her case like she always did, clear, firm, and fearless. Janet Holloway, she began, was not convicted based on facts. She was convicted based on fear. Fear of a system that lets one voice, with no evidence, no oversight, and no identity, sentence someone to decades in prison. She introduced the affidavit from the retired partner, then cross-referenced it with the arrest report, highlighting inconsistencies in time logs and property receipts. And finally, she dropped her closing bombshell. A sealed court order, found deep in an unrelated case file, revealing the identity of the confidential informant, a 17-year-old who had been arrested for shoplifting and offered leniency in exchange for cooperation. He'd named Janet Holloway in exchange for having his record expunged. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya said, holding up the report, "this wasn't justice. This was a trade." The courtroom went still. The judge recessed for 2 hours. When they returned, he spoke directly to Janet, who was now sitting at the defense table beside Maya. "This court finds the conviction of Ms. Holloway to be unsupported by reliable, constitutional evidence. The judgment is vacated. Ms. Holloway is free to go." Gasps, applause, tears. Janet collapsed into Maya's arms, shaking with disbelief. "My Barbies," she sobbed. "I get to see my Barbies." Outside, the media swarmed, but Maya stepped aside. This was Janet's moment, her redemption. Later that night, back at the Thompson Center, Maya pinned Janet's photo to the wall. 6 names, 6 lives. And beside them, a hand-drawn crayon card from Janet's granddaughter. "Thank you for giving us our grandma back." But even as the joy rippled through the team, the shadows kept creeping in. That same night, Tamika got a call from a blocked number. The voice said, "Tell the girl she's playing a game she won't win, or we'll start playing back." They reported it. Again. And the police said what they always said, "We'll look into it." But Maya was done waiting for protection from a system she didn't trust. She called a meeting. "If they're trying to scare us, it means they know we're hurting them," she said. "That's not a reason to stop. That's the reason we have to keep going." Devin nodded, "But we need security, real security." So they hired a part-time guard, upgraded the office with cameras and a panic system. Marcus, reluctantly but firmly, installed a reinforced door at home. You can fight the system, he told her, but I'm going to fight for you. And then came the news that changed everything. Richard Alton, the man who tried to frame her father, who buried Sandra's evidence, who nearly destroyed Tony Weller, was arrested. FBI agents raided his home at 6:13 a.m. He was charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy to suppress evidence, and tampering with federal investigations. Maya stood in stunned silence as the news broke. The man who started it all, the man who underestimated her, was finally going down. Her phone rang all day. Reporters, senators, TV producers. But one message hit different. It was from a law professor at Yale. You're not just a legal prodigy, you're a reformer. When you're ready, we'll make space for you here. Maya smiled, but she didn't reply. Not yet. There was still work to do. That night she stood in front of her wall of names, lives restored, stories told, justice delivered. But there was still too much silence. Too many unopened letters. She opened a fresh page in her notebook. At the top she wrote, Case 7 tomorrow. Because Maya Thompson wasn't finished. Not even close. The day after Richard Alton's arrest, the legal world trembled. Headlines ran wild. Legal titan toppled. Richard Alton faces federal charges. Teen crusader Maya Thompson scores another victory against injustice. Law firms released public apologies. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from prior endorsements. News channels aired replays of Maya's speeches, interviews, and cross-examinations. Commentators now called her the face of modern justice reform. But Maya didn't celebrate. She was already reading her next letter. This one was postmarked from Texas, a town she'd never heard of. The envelope was torn at the corners, the ink smudged. Inside was a 6-page handwritten note from a man named Aaron Blake, age 41, serving life without parole for the murder of a woman named Dana Halpin. He claimed innocence, not in vague terms, but in precise detail, times, witnesses, even GPS data from an old phone that had been ignored during trial. I didn't just lose a case, he wrote. I lost my daughter. She was 10, now she's 24. I haven't heard her voice in 14 years. Maya sat still after reading that line. She thought about her own dad, how losing him, even temporarily, had shattered her world. Aaron had lost a life. She added Aaron Blake's name to the whiteboard under potential reviews and passed the file to Devon. Let's start the intake, she said. But as her team dug into the case, they found something troubling. The forensic report, used by prosecutors to tie Aaron to the murder weapon, was written by a technician who had already been investigated for misconduct in 3 other cases. In each, he'd misplaced evidence, estimated results, and in one instance, completely fabricated a test result that led to an innocent man serving 8 years before exoneration. In Aaron's case, the technician claimed a match between Aaron's fingerprints and a gun found in a ditch 2 blocks from the crime scene, but there was no chain of custody, no photo log, no witness who saw the weapon being recovered, just the report. That's not just a weak link, Tamika said, that's a forged chain. Eli nodded. I don't know how this ever went to trial. Maya stared at the printout, because it was never about truth, it was about closing a case fast. She decided to fly to Texas. Marcus came with her, so did Devon. The courtroom was long behind them now. This time, they were taking it to the streets. Maya interviewed the arresting officer, who was now retired and oddly defensive. We had enough to make an arrest, he insisted. But not enough to convict truthfully, Maya replied. She asked for the full case file from the local courthouse. Half of it was missing. So she filed a public records request with the state. And in the meantime, she visited Aaron Blake in person. He walked into the prison visitor's room with slow steps and tired eyes, but the moment he saw Maya, something shifted. You're her, he said quietly, The girl from the news. She smiled, and you're the man who hasn't stopped fighting. They sat across from each other, no glass between them, just questions and the truth. He answered everything. I was in a gas station across town at the time of the murder, he said. The clerk remembered me, said I left right before the rain started, but the defense didn't follow up. They said it was too flimsy. Maya leaned forward. Do you remember what you bought? A lighter and a pack of mints. When they got back to their hotel that night, Maya did what few would think to do. She tracked down the gas station, and against all odds, it still existed, still run by the same family. She walked in, heart pounding, and asked the woman behind the counter, "Do you remember a man named Aaron Blake?" The woman stared for a moment, then whispered, "Yeah, I do. He came in that night, nervous. I remember because he kept checking his phone like he was late." "You told the police, right?" "I did. They never called me back." Maya's voice was quiet. "Would you say that again, under oath?" The woman nodded slowly. "I've lived with the guilt of that silence for 14 years. Yes, I'll testify." Back in Michigan, Maya filed the motion to reopen the case. Attached were the inconsistencies in the forensic report, the affidavit from the gas station clerk, and the results of her team's audit of the original court transcript, which showed the jury never heard about the time stamps on Aaron's phone or the weather data confirming rain didn't start until after the estimated time of death. Then Maya made the call to Aaron's daughter, now 24, living in Oregon, working 2 jobs. She didn't pick up. So Maya left a message. "Your dad never stopped thinking about you, and I believe he's innocent. If you ever want to talk, we're here." 1 week later, Aaron's conviction was officially challenged. The courtroom was packed again. Local media, activists, and sitting in the 3rd row, head low, eyes full, was Aaron's daughter. Maya saw her, didn't say a word, just nodded once. She presented the case like she always did, carefully, completely, no drama, just facts. The judge asked the prosecution why exculpatory evidence hadn't been introduced. They had no answer. The motion was granted. The conviction was vacated. Aaron Blake was free. He walked out of the courtroom with tears in his eyes, and his daughter beside him. They hugged in silence, both shaking. Maya stayed back. This was their moment. She didn't need the spotlight, she just needed the truth to win. Later that night, Aaron sent her a text. "For the first time in 14 years, I got to tell my daughter I love her. Thank you." Maya pinned his photo to her wall. 7 cases, 7 lives, 7 families rebuilt. But while victories grew, so did the tension. A senior state official called Maya's nonprofit an unsanctioned vigilante group. A talk show guest called her a danger to judicial integrity. One anonymous caller left a voicemail. "You're burning bridges that built this system." To which Maya muttered, "Good, let them burn." But in private, the weight pressed heavier. Marcus noticed the bags under her eyes, the long silences, the distant stares. "You haven't smiled in weeks," he said one night. Maya looked up from her desk. "Smiles don't change laws." "No, but they remind you why you're fighting." She looked at him, eyes tired. "I'm just scared, if I stop for even a second, someone else gets forgotten." He kneeled beside her. "You've done more than anyone thought possible, but you're still a kid. You don't have to carry this alone." Maya didn't answer right away. Then finally, she whispered, "I don't know how to stop." Marcus wrapped his arms around her and held her there for a long time. And outside, the wind whispered against the windows. The system stirred, the letters kept arriving. But for one night, Maya rested. She had earned that much. Tomorrow, the fight would begin again. It began with a letter, then a trial, then a wall covered in names. Now it was a movement. By the end of the year, the Thompson Center had handled 37 case reviews, 14 full investigations, and secured freedom for 9 wrongly convicted people. Each case bore its own scars, each client carried years of silence, and yet, one by one, Maya Thompson had peeled back the darkness and let the truth breathe again. But success came with sacrifice. Maya was no longer anonymous. Every grocery trip, every walk to school, every podcast episode was watched, dissected, debated. Politicians used her name in speeches, some to uplift, others to undermine. One state senator openly accused her of manipulating public sympathy to erode legal institutions. She read the article and pinned it beside a headline that simply said, "Another wrongfully convicted man, freed by 14-year-old advocate." She circled that number, 14, a reminder. She wasn't old enough to vote, drive, or even open a bank account without her father's name, but she had shifted the national conversation on justice. And now she was about to take the fight where few ever dared, the Supreme Court. It started with a case in Mississippi. A boy named Deshorn Hayes, age 16, sentenced to life without parole for a robbery gone wrong. He wasn't the shooter. He didn't carry a weapon, but under the felony murder rule, he was held accountable for everything that happened, despite running away before the fatal shot was fired. Deshorn had been in prison for 5 years already. He was a teenager when he entered. Now, he was a ghost behind concrete. When Maya read the transcripts, she froze. No mitigating factors were argued. No expert testimony on adolescent brain development. No questions about whether life without parole violated constitutional protections for juveniles. He was thrown away, she whispered, like a broken toy. She filed the paperwork to submit an amicus brief, a rare move for someone her age, but not illegal. She partnered with civil rights attorneys and constitutional scholars, all of whom supported her position. Deshorn's sentence violated the 8th Amendment's protection against cruel and unusual punishment. Her name appeared on the document's final page, typed neatly under the signatures of lawyers, professors, and scholars from across the country. Maya Thompson, Youth Legal Advocate, the Thompson Center. It made the front page of the Washington Post. And days later, Maya received an invitation. Hand-delivered. The Supreme Court of the United States invites Ms. Maya Thompson to attend oral arguments in Hayes v. Mississippi as an observing contributor. She held the envelope for several minutes before whispering, "They're listening." Her father beamed. But Maya didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because Deshorn was still locked away, still waking up to bars, still measuring his life in meal trays and silence. So she flew to Mississippi. Marcus came too. They stayed in a quiet hotel near the prison. And when she saw Deshorn, now 21, eyes dulled by years of abandonment, her resolve hardened. "You're not forgotten," she told him. He looked at her, disbelief clouding his face. "You came all this way for me." "I've always been on my way to you," she said. They spoke for an hour. He told her about books he'd read, poems he'd written, how he taught GED classes in the yard and mentored younger inmates. He wasn't broken, just buried. Maya promised him, "You'll have your day." Back in D.C., she walked the marble steps of the Supreme Court with Marcus beside her. She wore a simple navy dress, her notebook tucked under her arm, her name whispered in awe by reporters and legal clerks as she passed. Inside the chamber, she sat quietly in the back, listening as arguments were made. She scribbled notes, circled inconsistencies, highlighted phrases. And when it was over, one of the justices turned, just slightly, and gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. She nodded back. A month later, the court delivered its decision. In a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court determined that sentencing a juvenile to life without parole for a non-lethal felony was unconstitutional. Deshorn Hayes would be resentenced. Maya cried when she read the ruling, not just for him, but for every youth still locked away because someone decided they were too broken to fix. That night, she added a golden star next to Deshorn's name on her wall. He wasn't free, not yet. But he would be. It was the beginning of something larger. Her inbox now held thousands of letters. Judges reached out for training. Law schools wanted her input. State legislators quoted her in reform bills. And still Maya was Maya, backpack on, sneakers tied, notebook in hand. She kept going. Even when she was tired. Even when it was hard. Even when she didn't feel brave. Because courage, she'd learned, wasn't loud. It was quiet. Like a girl sitting alone at a table full of papers, reading one more letter, making one more call, drawing one more line between what was wrong and what could be made right. On her 15th birthday, Maya stood before an auditorium of 2,000 people at a justice conference in Chicago. Marcus watched from the front row. She took a breath, then began. When I was 11, I watched my father get arrested for a crime he didn't commit. When I was 12, I defended him in court. And when I was 13, I promised myself that I would never stop fighting until justice meant something more than a word people said after the damage was done. She paused, looked at the crowd, then continued. Some people say I'm just a kid, that I don't belong in courtrooms, that I'm stepping out of my place. But let me ask you something. If a kid can do your job better than you, maybe it's not me who's out of place. Maybe it's the system. Silence. Then thunderous applause. She smiled, just barely, and stepped back from the podium. Later that night, back home, Maya stood in front of her wall. There were now 12 faces. 12 people who were once caged by injustice. She ran her hand across the photos, whispering their names. Sandra, Tony, Darius, Jody, Janet, Aaron, Deshorn, and more. Each a reminder that the system didn't break all at once. It cracked slowly, quietly, until someone noticed and refused to look away. Maya reached for her notebook and opened it to the final page. At the top, she wrote, "This is not the end." She closed the book, then reached for a new one, because every letter she received was a story still unfinished. And every story was a chance to begin again. If you're still watching this, then you already know this story was never just about a courtroom. It wasn't just about Maya, or her dad, or any single person she helped walk free. This was about truth. About what happens when a little girl refuses to believe that being young means being powerless. About what's possible when courage isn't loud, but consistent. When justice isn't just a word, but a fight. You've seen Maya dig through forgotten files. You've seen her challenge lawyers twice her age. You've seen her give families their loved ones back. And still, she's not stopping. Because somewhere, right now, there's another letter being written. Another innocent person waiting behind bars. Another child wondering why the system works for everyone except the people they love. And Maya, she's still reading. Still answering. Still showing up. But she can't do it alone. This is your moment now. To believe in second chances. To stand up even when it's inconvenient. To speak up when silence is safer. Whether you're a student, a lawyer, a teacher, or someone who's just tired of seeing the wrong people punished while the real criminals hide behind paperwork and power, there's a place for you in this fight. So ask yourself, what if justice had a face, a name, a voice that couldn't be silenced? Now ask yourself, what if that voice was yours? Follow Maya's journey, share her story, support the movement, and when the next person says, "It's just the way things are," you tell them, "No, it's the way things were." Because now we're changing that. One voice, one case, one truth at a time. Join the fight. Because justice should never depend on luck, money, or age. It should depend on us.